In this Facebook group, Our Progressive Revolution, the following picture was posted. If you can't see it, it shows Kamala being sworn in, and there's a little girl wearing purple. Wow, just like Kamala. You don't think that might have been staged, do you? Who is raising her hand in a similar pose. The little girl is watching Kamala on television. Just so happens to be MSNBC. The caption says, "A friend of a friend's niece watching Kamala being sworn in." Some of the reactions in this group were predictable. Yes, a lot of Bernie Sanders supporters are shitlibs, and you can see them all through this thread. Howard says, "I know how much representation matters for kids. I just wish she had a better choice as a representation. Her authoritarian neoliberal past seems to be par for the course for the Democratic Party lately. And then we've got all the shitlibbery. Obviously, you were never a little girl. And then we have this tirade of identity politics that Bernie supporters should probably know better than to spout, but they don't. Kirsten Thompson, the shitlib, says, "I definitely understand and agree to what you're saying, but fortunately, little girls like that don't understand, let alone care about policies and such." Fortunately, huh? All she sees is another woman of color helping run our country, and it's incredible for little girls all over the country. Such a response might leave you speechless, but fortunately we have Becky Spoon to come through. This is a very positive response to shitlibbery, and I recommend it highly. So while we like the representation that we see in the picture, we only hate discrimination and injustice, and corrupt political leaders who support and defend it, such as Kamala, no matter what party, gender, race, religion, sexual orientation, whatever. Thank heaven some people hated slavery too. We love what is right and hate what is morally indefensible and fiscally insane, like the private profit before people health insurance model that Biden wants to build on, and Kamala wants to build on. If we had more help and some honest leadership, as opposed to Kamala Harris, for a real change, maybe we could fix it. As long as half of us believe blue lies and the other half believe red ones, we won't stand even half a chance. Well done, Becky. I wonder if the little girl in the picture already knows that war is an atrocity. Kamala doesn't seem to know this. And Joe Biden most certainly doesn't know this either. U.S. forces choppered into Syria 24 hours after new commander-in-chief takes power. A large convoy of U.S. military personnel headed into Syria on Thursday along with hundreds of troops some 24 hours after President Joe Biden took office and took on his commander-in-chief role, foreign media reported. Only foreign media reported it. Citing Syrian state news agency SANA, I-24 News reported that a convoy of about 40 trucks and armored vehicles entered northeastern Syria on Thursday, supported by helicopters. And of course, all of this is to protect U.S. oil interests. Jen Perlman tweeted, "My biggest fear of a Biden presidency was foreign policy. In just 3 days, he's authorizing troop escalation in Iraq and Syria. I did not vote for this, did you?" Yes, you did. You voted for Joe Biden. Has corporate media mentioned this? No, they haven't. Is your rep funded by the military intelligence complex like mine? They all are. Comrade Misty is Putin's buddy said, "Sorry, Jen, if you voted for Biden, you voted for this. That's how that works." But Trump! And now we turn to Danny Sjursen, The Future of War, American Style. A Bidenesque tour of America's regional and global military adventures. If you remember, Danny was on this show a while back. He is a retired major from the U.S. Army. Hard as it is to believe in this time of record pandemic deaths, insurrection, and an unprecedented encore impeachment, Joe Biden is now officially at the helm of the U.S. war machine. He is, in other words, the fourth president to oversee America's unending and unsuccessful post-9/11 military campaigns. In terms of active U.S. combat, that's only happened once before in the Philippines, America's second longest, if often forgotten, overseas combat campaign. Yet that conflict was limited to a single Pacific archipelago. Biden inherits a global war and burgeoning new Cold War spanning 4 continents and a military mired in active operations in dozens of countries, combat in some 14 of them, and bombing in at least 7. That sort of scope has been standard fare for American presidents for almost 2 decades now. Still, while this country's post-9/11 war presidents have more in common than their partisan divisions might suggest, distinctions do matter, especially at a time when the White House almost unilaterally drives foreign policy. So what can we expect from Commander-in-Chief Biden? In other words, what's the forecast for U.S. service members who have invested their lives and limbs in future conflict, as well as for the speculators in the military-industrial complex and anxious foreigners in the countries still engulfed in America's war on terror who usually stand to lose it all? Many Trumpsters and some libertarians foresee disaster, that the man who, as a leading senator, facilitated and cheered on the disastrous Iraq War will surely escalate American adventurism abroad. On the other hand, establishment Democrats and most liberals who are desperately and understandably relieved to see Donald Trump go find that prediction preposterous. Clearly, Biden must have learned from past mistakes, changed his tune, and should responsibly bring U.S. wars to a close, even if at a time still to be determined. Maybe we'll incrementally end the wars. In a sense, both may prove right, and in another sense, both wrong. The guess of this longtime war watcher and one-time war fighter reading the tea leaves. Expect Biden to both eschew big new wars and avoid fully ending existing ones. At the margins, think Iran, he may improve matters some. In certain rather risky areas, Russian relations for instance, he could worsen them, but in most cases, the rest of the greater Middle East, Africa, and China, he's likely to remain squarely on the status quo spectrum. And mind you, there's nothing reassuring about that. It hardly requires clairvoyance to offer such guesswork. That's because Biden basically is who he says he is and who he's always been, and the man's simply never been transformational. One need look no further than his long and generally interventionist past record or the nature of his current national security picks to know that the safe money is on more of the same. When Danny was on earlier, that's what we talked about, national security picks, particularly General Lloyd Austin. Whether the issues are war, race, crime, or economics, Uncle Joe has made a career of bending with the prevailing political winds, and it's unlikely this old dog can truly learn any new tricks. Furthermore, he's filled his foreign policy squad with Obama-Clinton retreads, a number of whom were architects of, if not the initial Iraq and Afghan debacles, then disasters in Libya, Syria, West Africa, Yemen, and the Afghan surge of 2009. In other words, Biden is putting the former arsonists in charge of the forever war fire brigade. There's further reason to fear that he may even reject Trump's "if Obama was for it, I'm against it" brand of war on terror policymaking and thereby reverse the Donald's very late, very modest troop withdrawals in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Somalia. Yet even if this new old hand of a president evades potentially existential escalation with nuclear Russia or China and offers only an Obama reboot when it comes to persistent low-intensity warfare, what he does still will matter, most of all to the global citizens who are too often its victims. So here's a brief region-by-region flyover tour of what Joe's squad may have in store for both the world and the American military sent to police that world. So then he goes on to talk about the Middle East, including the war in Afghanistan, the boondoggle that is Syria, and Iran. Then he moves to Africa, including Somalia, and Russia and China. And then we get to Endgame, war as abstraction. Historically, foreign policy paradigm shifts are exceedingly rare, especially when they tack toward peace. Such pivots appear almost impossible once the immense power of America's military-industrial complex, invested in every way in endless war, as well as endless preparations for future Cold Wars, has reached today's grotesque level. This is especially so when each and every one of Biden's archetypal national security nominees has, metaphorically speaking, had his or her mortgage paid by some offshoot of that war industry. Not even metaphorically. In other words, as the muckraking novelist Upton Sinclair used to say, it is difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends upon his not understanding it. Ding, ding, ding! Count on tactics including drones, commandos, CIA spooks, and a mostly amenable media to help the Biden administration make war yet more invisible, at least to Americans. Most Trump-detesting and domestically focused citizens will find that just dandy, even if exhausted troopers, military families, and bombed or blockaded foreigners won't. More than anything, Biden wishes to avoid overseas embarrassments like unexpected American casualties or scandalous volumes of foreign civilian deaths, anything that might derail his domestic agenda or hoped-for restorative leadership legacy. That, unfortunately, may prove to be a pipe dream and leads me to two final predictions. Formulaic forever war will never cease boomeranging back home to rot our Republican institutions, and neither a celestial god nor secular history will judge Biden, the war president, kindly. So not only is Kamala a war hawk, 1/3 of Biden's Pentagon transition team hails from organizations financed by the weapons industry. Here again, it's difficult to get a man or a woman to understand something when his or her salary depends upon his or her not understanding it. The president-elect, who is now the president, is drawing from hawkish think tanks funded by arms companies. I'm not going to read you all of this because I've already talked about all of these appointments. I will urge you to keep paying attention to his cabinet and other cronies. Obviously, we're in for a rough ride ahead, and it shouldn't surprise anyone. So don't be like Jen Perlman and say stupid shit like, I did not vote for this. Did you? We need to continually remind our shitlib friends, yes, they did vote for this, and yes, they are culpable. We won't forget that we need diversity, we need representation, but most of all, we need good people. And right now, we have anything but that.